Strong men are not destroyed by weakness. They are destroyed by a reflex to react, a reflex to explain, a reflex to defend their ego instead of protecting their future. Every time you feel triggered, rushed, emotional, or desperate to respond, you are leaking power. Not because you are incapable, but because you were never trained to pause. This book is about identifying the one reflex that turns potential into regret, discipline into drama, and strength into self-sabotage. If you master this reflex, you become untouchable. If you don't, it will quietly ruin your life while you think you're being real.
Authority does not disappear overnight. It leaks, quietly, moment by moment. And the fastest way to lose it is reaction. Reaction is when emotion moves faster than intention. Reaction is when your mouth opens before your mind arrives. Reaction is when someone presses a button and you jump. Reaction is the enemy of authority. You may think reaction makes you look strong. You may think fast responses show confidence. You may think defending yourself proves intelligence. It doesn't. It proves predictability. And once you are predictable, you are controllable. That's the key. Strong men are not tested for strength. They are tested for reactions. People don't ask, how powerful is he? They ask, how easily can I move him? Every emotional response answers that question. You have a choice. Always. And most men choose wrong because they don't know they're choosing at all. They think reaction is automatic. They think emotion is honest. They think speed is confidence. It's not about honesty. It's not about passion. It's not about intensity. It's about discipline. Reaction hands your authority to the last person who spoke. Intention keeps it with you. Look at leaders who lose rooms. They speak too fast. They interrupt. They over-explain. They defend points no one asked them to defend. Not because they are weak men, but because they are untrained men. They feel pressure and they release it through reaction. And pressure does not leave the room, it transfers. When you react, you absorb pressure. When you pause, you project it. That's the key. Authority is not volume. Authority is not dominance. Authority is composure under stimulation. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to think. You don't need their permission to be silent. But your reflex tells you otherwise. Your reflex tells you, answer now. Your reflex tells you, fix this. Your reflex tells you, defend yourself. And every time you obey that reflex, you lose ground. Reaction puts you on the back foot. Authority stands still. Consider this. In any confrontation, the calmer person controls the frame. Always. The man who reacts is negotiating from emotion. The man who pauses is negotiating from position. That's not philosophy, that's reality. Look at business deals that fall apart. One party pushes, the other reacts. The leverage shifts instantly. Look at arguments that spiral. One insult lands, the reflex fires. Words are thrown, respect is lost. And afterward, you replay the moment in your head. I should have said nothing. I should have waited. I should have stayed calm. That regret is not weakness. It's awareness arriving late. You had a choice. You just didn't see it in time. That's the key. Authority lives in the gap between stimulus and response. But most men have no gap. Trigger, reaction, damage. Trigger, reaction, loss of respect. Trigger, reaction, authority erosion. Over time, people stop listening. They stop deferring. They stop trusting your judgment. Not because you lack skill, but because you lack restraint. Reaction is the enemy of authority. This chapter is not asking you to become passive. It's asking you to become precise. There is nothing powerful about blurting. There is nothing commanding about emotional leakage. Strong men choose when to speak. Weak men speak because they feel something. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Let me be clear. Calm is not softness. Silence is not submission. Pausing is not fear. Pausing is control. When you don't react, people fill the silence with assumptions, and those assumptions usually favor strength. They wonder what you know. They wonder what you're planning. They wonder if they overplayed their hand. That's authority. Reaction removes mystery. Authority thrives on it. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need their permission to breathe. You don't need their permission to think before you speak. The world pressures men to be fast, loud, and expressive, but the world rewards men who are deliberate. That's the contradiction. And if you want authority, you must accept it. Here is the behavioral shift, simple but uncomfortable. When you feel the urge to respond immediately, don't. That's it. No speech, no defense, no explanation. Just a pause, a breath, a moment of restraint. That pause is you reclaiming authority. You are telling your nervous system, I decide. You are telling the room, I am not rushed. You are telling reality, I move on my terms. You have a choice. Every trigger is an invitation to give up control or claim it. And most men give it away for free. They react to texts, they react to tone, they react to disrespect, real or imagined, and every reaction trains others how to treat them. Predictable men get pressed, reactive men get tested, uncontrolled men get played. That's not judgment, that's observation. Authority is built when people learn one thing about you. You don't move easily. You don't flinch, you don't scramble, you don't perform emotionally on demand. Reaction is the enemy of authority because it teaches people they can pull your strings. And once they know that, they never stop pulling. You don't need their permission to stop reacting. You don't need their approval to stay composed. You don't need to explain your restraint. It's not about pride, it's about position. And position is everything. This chapter is your foundation, because until you kill the reflex to react, every other discipline will leak. You can't lead if you're triggered. You can't command if you're rushed. You can't build if you're constantly responding. Authority begins when reaction ends. You have a choice. And now that you see it, you're responsible for it. You learned where authority dies. Now it's time to understand why emotion speeds that death up even faster. You mastered awareness. Now let's sharpen control.
Weakness is not always loud. Sometimes it's fast. Fast replies, fast emotions, fast decisions made under pressure. Most men don't fail because they are incapable. They fail because they move too quickly when emotion is involved. Speed feels powerful. Speed feels confident. Speed feels decisive. But emotional speed is not strength. Emotional speed is a weak man's habit. That's the key. Strong men are not slow because they hesitate. They are slow because they choose. There is a difference. Weak men rush to relieve discomfort. Strong men tolerate discomfort until clarity arrives. You have a choice. And most men choose speed because speed feels like control. It's not. It's surrender. When emotion accelerates your actions, you are no longer leading yourself. You are being led by sensation. Anger pushes you forward. Fear pushes you to explain. Ego pushes you to prove. And every push shortens your lifespan of authority. Look closely at emotional speed. It shows up when someone disrespects you and you respond instantly. It shows up when a message triggers you and you fire back. It shows up when tension enters the room and you rush to fill the silence. Why? Because silence creates pressure, and pressure exposes discipline. That's the key. Most men are not afraid of confrontation, they are afraid of stillness. Stillness forces self-control. Speed avoids it. That's why emotional speed is seductive. It gives you relief. But relief is not power. Relief is escape. Every time you react quickly, you are escaping discomfort. And every time you escape discomfort, you train weakness. It's not about intelligence. It's not about experience. It's not about talent. It's about discipline. Strong men slow down when emotion speeds up. Weak men speed up when emotion spikes. That's the dividing line. Watch leaders who fail under pressure. They talk more, they justify faster, they over-communicate, they explain intentions instead of executing decisions. Not because they lack vision, but because emotion hijacked timing. Timing is everything. Speed in logic is useful. Speed in emotion is dangerous. That's the difference most men never learn. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need their permission to take space. You don't need their permission to pause before responding. But emotional speed tells you otherwise. It tells you now or never. It tells you respond or lose. It tells you if you don't answer, you look weak. That voice is lying. The man who controls tempo controls outcomes, always. In negotiations, the slower party wins. In arguments, the calmer party dominates. In leadership, the composed man commands respect. Speed exposes urgency. Urgency exposes need, and need is weakness. That's the key. Strong men are never urgent with emotion. They don't rush anger. They don't rush defense. They don't rush explanation. They let emotion pass before action begins. Because emotion clouds judgment, and judgment is authority. You have a choice. The next time emotion spikes, you can move fast or you can move right. Most men confuse movement with progress. They say something quickly to feel better. They respond instantly to feel strong. They lash out to reclaim pride. But pride is expensive. It costs clarity. It costs leverage. It costs respect. It's not about pride. It's about position. And emotional speed destroys position. Here is the discipline. When emotion rises, slow everything else down. Your breathing, your speech, your body. Do not speed match emotion. Emotion wants momentum. Discipline denies it. That's the key. You are not suppressing emotion. You are delaying action. There is a difference. Suppression stores pressure. Delay redirects power. Strong men delay. They don't react at emotional speed. They respond at intentional speed. That's why they win long term. Emotional speed feels good short term. Discipline pays long term. And life always collects its payment. Every fast emotional decision comes with interest, lost respect, burned bridges, regret in hindsight. You already know this. You felt it. Moments where you spoke too quickly. Moments where you responded emotionally. Moments where you wished you waited. Those moments were not accidents. They were habits. And habits can be broken, but only if you see them clearly. Emotional speed is not masculinity. It is not confidence. It is not decisiveness. It is lack of control dressed as strength. That's the key. Strong men are not impressed by speed. They are impressed by restraint, because restraint requires mastery. You don't need their permission to master yourself. You don't need applause for slowing down. You don't need validation for choosing discipline. You have a choice, and every time you choose patience over impulse, you reclaim authority. This chapter is not asking you to become slow in life. It is asking you to become slow with emotion. Fast thinking, slow reacting. That is the formula. If you cannot slow down emotionally, you will always be manipulated by faster triggers. People will bait you, situations will rush you, pressure will move you, and you will think you are choosing when you are actually being pushed. Authority begins when speed no longer controls you. You learned that reaction destroys authority. Now you see why speed accelerates that destruction. Because speed removes choice, And without choice, there is no power. Slow down the emotion, control the tempo, protect your position. You have a choice, and now that you understand speed, it's time to confront the deeper reason men react at all. They want to be seen, they want to be acknowledged, they want validation. You've slowed the body, now we confront the ego.
Most men don't react because they are angry. They react because they want to be noticed. That's the truth. The urge to respond is not about logic. It's not about correcting misinformation. It's not about defending truth. It's about visibility. That's the key. When someone challenges you and your body tightens, when a message irritates you and your fingers move instantly, when silence feels uncomfortable and you rush to fill it, you are not protecting your position, you are protecting your ego. And ego does not build authority. Ego leaks it. You have a choice, but first you must see the trap. The need to respond is the need to be seen. Seen as competent, seen as intelligent, seen as dominant, seen as right. But authority is never proven through reaction. Authority is assumed when reaction is unnecessary. Weak men announce themselves. Strong men are noticed without trying. That's the difference. Look at how most arguments begin. Someone says something dismissive, something inaccurate, something provocative, and instantly the reflex fires. I need to correct this. I need to defend myself. I need to explain. Why? Because silence feels like invisibility, and invisibility scares undisciplined egos. That's the key. Men who lack inner validation seek external confirmation. They want acknowledgement. They want engagement. They want response. But response is not respect. Often, response is exactly what the other person wants. Engagement feeds them. Emotion rewards them. Reaction validates them. And you mistake activity for power. It's not about truth. It's about discipline. Strong men do not chase acknowledgement. They let acknowledgement come to them. They don't rush to be seen. They build lives that can't be ignored. You don't need their permission to stay silent. You don't need their permission to disengage. You don't need their permission to not explain yourself. But your ego tells you otherwise. Your ego says if you don't respond, you lose. Your ego says silence makes you look weak. Your ego says they'll think they won. Let them think whatever they want. Authority does not live in opinions. It lives in outcomes. That's the key. Men who are secure don't argue visibility. They command it through consistency. Men who lack security demand attention through reaction. That's why online arguments never produce winners, only exposure. Everyone sees who is emotional. Everyone sees who is triggered. Everyone sees who can't let go. And exposure without respect is humiliation. You've seen it. Men typing paragraphs to strangers. Men defending choices to people with no authority. Men explaining themselves to audiences who don't matter. Not because they are stupid, because they are seeking recognition. And recognition is a poor substitute for self-respect. You have a choice. Every time you feel the urge to respond, ask yourself one question. Who am I trying to impress? If the answer is someone who has no impact on my life, then silence is your upgrade. That's the key. Strong men don't respond to everything. They respond to what moves the needle. Everything else is noise. Noise exists to pull you into reaction. Reaction exists to drain your energy. And energy is currency. Every unnecessary response is a withdrawal. Every emotional explanation is a loss. It's not about expression. It's about conservation. Men who need to be seen spend energy. Men who are already solid invest it. There is a reason high-status men speak less, not because they are mysterious by design, but because they are selective by discipline. They don't fill space to feel important. They let silence do the filtering. Silence filters the insecure from the composed. Silence filters the reactive from the authoritative. That's the key. When you don't respond, one of two things happens. The other person escalates, revealing insecurity, or they retreat, revealing respect. Either way, you gain information. Reaction gives you none. Reaction blinds you. Silence shows you everything. You don't need their permission to observe.
You don't need their permission to wait. You don't need their permission to disengage. The need to respond is emotional hunger, and hungry men make poor decisions. Strong men are fed from within. They don't need constant confirmation. They don't need to win every exchange. They don't need to prove intelligence in real time. They let results speak. That's the key. Here is the behavioral shift. The next time you feel compelled to respond immediately, don't ask, "What should I say?" Ask, "Why do I want to say anything at all?" That question exposes ego. And once ego is exposed, discipline can step in. You have a choice. You can feed the reflex or starve it. Every time you choose silence over validation, you weaken the habit that keeps you small. This is not about becoming cold, it's about becoming grounded. It's not about avoiding communication, it's about eliminating unnecessary exposure. Strong men don't broadcast themselves, they position themselves, and position is built quietly. You've now seen the pattern. Reaction destroys authority. Speed accelerates loss. Validation addiction fuels both. And until validation is removed, discipline cannot stabilize. You've slowed your emotions. You've resisted reaction. Now you must learn why silence itself is feared, because silence removes ego's oxygen, and undisciplined minds panic without it. You've confronted the need to be seen. Now let's confront what happens when you refuse to perform.
Silence is not empty. Silence is pressure. And most men cannot tolerate pressure without reacting. That's the truth. Silence terrifies undisciplined minds because it removes their escape. When there is noise, you can hide. When there is talking, you can perform. When there is reaction, you can discharge emotion. But silence? Silence exposes. That's the key. An undisciplined mind needs stimulation to feel alive. It needs engagement to feel important. It needs reaction to feel relevant. Silence removes all of that. And what remains is the man himself. No distractions, no validation, no audience. Just self-control or the lack of it. You have a choice. Most men break silence immediately. They talk, they joke, they explain, they fill space. Not because something needs to be said, but because something needs to be avoided. Discomfort. Silence forces you to sit with tension, and tension is where weak discipline collapses. That's why silence is power. Strong men don't fear silence because they are not running from themselves. Weak men fear silence because it exposes instability. Watch it happen. You stay quiet after a provocation. You don't respond immediately. You don't defend. The other person starts talking more. They justify. They over-explain. They escalate. Why? Because silence turns pressure outward. That's the key. Whoever breaks silence first loses leverage. Always. Silence forces the undisciplined to reveal themselves. Their insecurity leaks through words. Their need for control leaks through tone. Their impatience leaks through repetition. And you didn't say a word. Reaction hides weakness. Silence reveals it. That's why silence terrifies them. You don't need their permission to stay quiet. You don't need their permission to observe. You don't need their permission to let discomfort exist. But your reflex tells you otherwise. Your reflex says, say something. Your reflex says, this is awkward. Your reflex says, you're losing control. That reflex is lying. Silence is not loss of control. Silence is control. It's not about avoidance, it's about discipline. Undisciplined minds equate silence with weakness because they mistake activity for strength. They think power is loud. They think authority is verbal. They think presence is performance. But real authority is felt, not announced. That's the key. Silence shifts the burden. When you stay silent, the other person must carry the interaction. They must explain, they must justify, they must fill the gap. And most can't handle it. They rush to reclaim comfort.
Comfort-seeking is weakness. Strong men tolerate discomfort longer than others. That's why they win. Silence also terrifies undisciplined minds because it removes feedback. They don't know how they're being received. They don't know if they're winning. They don't know if you agree, disagree, or judge. Uncertainty makes weak men anxious, and anxious men talk. That's the key. Silence introduces uncertainty. Uncertainty destabilizes egos, and destabilized egos expose themselves. You have a choice. You can fill silence to soothe others, or you can hold it and watch truth emerge. Every time you choose silence, you strengthen restraint. Every time you break it unnecessarily, you weaken it. It's not about communication, it's about control. Strong men speak with purpose. Weak men speak to escape tension. Strong men let silence work. Weak men interrupt it. That's the dividing line. Consider negotiations. The first person to talk after an offer usually loses. Why? Because silence pressures the other side to adjust. The same rule applies to life. Silence pressures reality to reveal itself. Reaction interrupts that process. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to think. You don't need their permission to withhold response. Silence is not rudeness, it is selection. You are selecting when and how you engage. Undisciplined minds hate this because they can't control it. They can't rush you, they can't bait you, they can't provoke you into mistakes. And when they lose control over you, they lose power. That's the key. Silence also terrifies undisciplined minds because it removes emotional mirroring. Most men regulate their emotions through others. They look for reactions to tell them how to feel. When you don't react, they feel exposed. Their anger has nowhere to land. Their sarcasm falls flat. Their manipulation fails. And failure creates panic. Silence is a mirror. It reflects their state back at them. Strong men can look into that mirror. Weak men smash it with words. You have a choice. The next time silence appears, don't rush to destroy it. Sit in it. Feel the tension. Notice the urge to speak. Resist it. That resistance is training. Discipline is not built in action. It's built in restraint. And silence is restraint in its purest form. This chapter is not telling you to never speak. It's teaching you when not to. Speak when it adds value. Stay silent when it adds leverage. That's the key. Undisciplined minds hate silence because it takes away their tools. No noise, no distraction, no emotional discharge. Only self-control remains, and that terrifies them. But for you, silence is where authority matures. You've learned why reaction destroys authority. You've learned why speed accelerates loss. You've learned how validation fuels both of them. Now you understand why silence exposes all of it. Silence is not absence. Silence is dominance. But silence alone is not enough, because there is one emotion that shatters silence faster than any other: anger. Anger makes men predictable. Anger makes men loud. Anger makes men easy to manipulate. You've learned to hold silence. Now you must learn to control the emotion that breaks it most often.
Anger feels powerful. That's why it's dangerous. Anger gives the illusion of strength. It tightens the body. It sharpens the voice. It floods the system with energy. And in that moment, men think they are in control. They are not. Anger is predictability in disguise. That's the key. The moment anger appears, your next move becomes obvious. You will speak louder. You will move faster. You will defend, attack, or explain. And anyone watching knows exactly what comes next. Strong men are not unpredictable because they are chaotic. They are unpredictable because they are calm. Calm men cannot be read easily. Angry men can. That's why anger is such a useful tool for other people. If someone can make you angry, they can make you move. And if they can make you move, they can control direction. You have a choice, but anger tries to steal that choice. Anger compresses time. It demands immediate action. It whispers, "Do something now." That's the trap. It's not about emotion, it's about discipline. Anger itself is not the enemy. Uncontrolled anger is. Anger without discipline turns into exposure. You reveal your values. You reveal your insecurities. You reveal where you can be pushed. And once revealed, those buttons will be pressed again. That's the key. Watch how manipulation works. A comment is made. A tone is used. A boundary is nudged. If you explode, the lesson is learned. They know what works. From that point on, you are predictable. Predictable men are not respected. They are managed. Strong men are not managed. They manage themselves first. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their permission to not react. You don't need their permission to breathe through anger. But anger tells you otherwise. Anger tells you if you don't react, you're weak. Anger tells you they'll think you lost. Anger tells you you must assert dominance now. Anger lies. Dominance is not asserted through emotion. It is established through consistency. That's the key. The man who can feel anger and not obey it is dangerous in the right way, because he cannot be baited. No leverage, no buttons, no shortcuts. Anger makes men loud. Calm makes men solid. One is temporary, the other compounds. You have a choice. Every time anger rises, you can vent it or contain it. Venting feels relieving. Containing feels uncomfortable. And discomfort is where strength is built. Strong men do not eliminate anger. They delay it. They don't suppress it. They redirect it. Suppression explodes later. Redirection sharpens action. That's the difference. Here is what undisciplined anger looks like. Quick responses, sharp words, regret afterward. You know the pattern. Anger gives you confidence in the moment and regret in the aftermath. That regret is the cost of predictability. It's not about expression, it's about timing. Strong men choose when anger becomes useful. They do not let it choose for them. They breathe first. They slow their body. They delay their mouth. Because once words leave, authority leaves with them. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to step back. You don't need their permission to feel anger without displaying it. Anger displayed is information given, and information is leverage. That's the key. The most dangerous man in the room is not the loudest. It's the calm one whose anger you never see. Because you don't know where his line is. You don't know what triggers him. You don't know how he'll respond. Uncertainty creates respect. Anger removes it. Anger also destroys silence. It shatters restraint. It pulls you back into reaction. It collapses everything you've built so far. That's why anger must be mastered early, before skill, before strategy, before leadership, because anger will sabotage all of them. You have a choice. The next time anger appears, don't ask how to release it. Ask how to control it. Control starts with the body. Slow your breathing. Relax your jaw. Unclench your hands. These are not small actions. They are commands to your nervous system. When the body slows, the mind follows. That's the key. Anger thrives on speed. Discipline thrives on delay. Delay turns anger into information instead of ammunition. Information can be used. Ammunition only creates mess. Strong men convert anger into boundaries, not outbursts. They respond later with clarity, not immediately with heat. And when they finally speak, it carries weight, because it is rare, because it is measured, because it is controlled. Anger expressed without discipline is noise. Anger expressed with discipline is authority. That's the difference.
You've learned how reaction destroys authority. You've slowed emotional speed. You've removed the need for validation. You've learned the power of silence. Now you face the emotion that breaks all of that if left unchecked: anger. And now you know the truth. Anger does not make you strong. Anger makes you predictable. And predictability is weakness. But there is another reflex that quietly erodes power, even when anger is controlled. The reflex to explain yourself, to justify, to clarify, to seek understanding from people who have not earned it. You've mastered anger. Now let's eliminate another leak.
Every explanation has a cost. Most men never calculate it. They think explaining makes them clear. They think explaining makes them reasonable. They think explaining protects their image. It doesn't. Unnecessary explanation erodes authority. That's the key. Strong men do not explain themselves to people who have no authority over their outcomes. Weak men do. And the difference is not intelligence, it's discipline. You have a choice. Every time you explain yourself, you are answering a question, spoken or unspoken. The question is not, what do you mean? The real question is, do you feel the need to justify yourself to me? And the moment you answer that question with words, you reveal position. Explanation places the listener above you. That's the truth most men resist. It's not about clarity, it's about hierarchy. When you explain yourself to someone unqualified, you are accepting them as a judge, and judges must be answered. Strong men choose their judges carefully. Look at where explanations usually happen. Family members questioning your decisions, coworkers doubting your direction, strangers online challenging your beliefs. And instead of letting results speak, men rush to clarify. Why? Because silence feels like surrender. Because not being understood feels uncomfortable. Because ego wants approval. That's the key. The reflex to explain is rooted in validation hunger. You want them to get it. You want to be seen as reasonable. You want to correct their perception. But perception is not your responsibility. Results are. You don't need their permission to live your life. You don't need their permission to choose your path. You don't need their permission to move forward. Yet explanation asks for it indirectly. Every unnecessary explanation says, I need you to understand before I proceed. Strong men proceed regardless. Weak men wait for agreement. That's the dividing line. Reaction is the enemy of authority. Explanation is reaction in disguise. It feels calmer, it sounds logical, but it is still submission to pressure. Pressure to be understood, pressure to be accepted, pressure to be approved. And pressure only works on men who respond to it. You have a choice. Ask yourself one question before explaining anything. Does this person have real authority over my future? If the answer is no, silence is strength. That's the key. Unqualified people ask questions to feel important, not informed. They challenge to provoke, not to learn. And when you explain yourself to them, you reward that behavior. You teach them they can pull you into justification. And once they learn that, they keep pulling. Strong men are not difficult to understand. They are selective about who gets access. Explanation gives access, and access must be earned. It's not about arrogance, it's about boundaries. Boundaries protect energy. Every explanation costs energy. Every justification drains focus. Every defense diverts attention from execution. Execution is where authority compounds. Talking about why you're doing something does not build power. Doing it does. That's the key. Look at men who command respect. They don't narrate their decisions. They don't debate their direction. They don't defend their standards. They state once or not at all, and then they act.
Silence backed by action is unarguable. Explanations invite counterarguments. You explain, they question, you clarify, they challenge. Now you're trapped in a loop, and loops are where momentum dies. You don't need their permission to exit the loop. You don't need their permission to disengage. You don't need their permission to stop explaining. Strong men recognize when dialogue stops being productive and becomes performative. Performative conversation is weakness. It exists to soothe egos, not solve problems. That's the key. Here is the behavioral discipline. The next time someone questions your decision, pause. Ask yourself, do they have authority? Do they have experience? Do they have skin in the outcome? If not, your response is simple. Minimal, neutral, final. No elaboration, no defense, no emotional padding. This is not coldness. This is precision. Strong men communicate efficiently. Weak men over-communicate emotionally. It's not about being misunderstood. It's about being unmoved. People will misunderstand you. Let them. Misunderstanding has never stopped a disciplined man from winning, but over-explaining has stopped many. Because while you're explaining, you're not building. While you're justifying, you're not progressing. While you're defending, you're not leading. That's the cost. You have a choice. You can spend energy managing perceptions, or you can invest energy creating results. One creates noise, the other creates authority. Explanation feels responsible in the moment. Silence feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is where power grows. Strong men choose long-term authority over short-term comfort. They don't explain themselves to unqualified people because they don't need to. Their lives explain for them. You've learned how reaction destroys authority. You've slowed emotional speed. You've cut validation addiction. You've mastered silence. You've contained anger. Now you've eliminated unnecessary explanation. But there is a deeper system behind all of this. A system that decides whether you stay calm or collapse, whether you react or respond, whether you hold authority or give it away. That system lives in your body, and if you don't train it, it will betray you. You stopped explaining. Now it's time to understand what really controls you under pressure.
You don't rise to the level of your intentions. You fall to the level of your nervous system. That's the truth most men never confront. You can read every book. You can repeat every principle. You can understand every concept intellectually. But when pressure hits, your nervous system decides. And your nervous system decides your rank. That's the key. Rank is not about titles. Rank is not about money. Rank is not about confidence you talk about. Rank is about how your body behaves under stress. When tension enters the room, what happens to you? Does your breathing speed up? Does your jaw tighten? Does your chest compress? Does your mind race? Those reactions are not personality traits. They are conditioning. And untrained conditioning destroys authority. You have a choice, but choice disappears when the nervous system is overwhelmed. That's why men react even when they know better. They're not stupid, they're dysregulated. And a dysregulated man cannot lead. It's not about mindset, it's about regulation. Most men try to think their way out of pressure. That fails, because pressure is physical before it is mental. The nervous system fires first, the mind rationalizes second. If your body panics, your thoughts follow. That's the key. High-ranking men are not calmer because life is easier for them. Life is easier because they are calmer. They have trained their nervous system to stay online under stress. They don't spike, they don't freeze, they don't collapse into reaction. They stay present. Presence is power. A man who can stay present when others destabilize instantly becomes the reference point in the room. Everyone orients to him. That is rank. You don't need their permission to regulate yourself. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need their permission to take control of your body. But most men never do. They live in constant low-grade stress, always alert, always reactive, always braced for impact. And over time, that becomes their baseline. That baseline determines everything: how you speak, how you decide, how you react, how others perceive you. A man with a regulated nervous system speaks slower, moves deliberately, listens fully. A man with a dysregulated nervous system interrupts, explains, defends, rushes. You already see the pattern: reaction, speed, validation, anger, explanation. All of it comes back to regulation. That's the key. Your nervous system does not care about your goals, it cares about safety. And if it senses threat, real or imagined, it will take control. That's why tone can trigger you. That's why silence can feel unbearable. That's why confrontation can hijack your mouth. Your body thinks it's under attack. And when the body takes over, authority disappears. You have a choice, but first you must train the body to tolerate pressure. Strong men are not fearless, they are regulated. They feel the same stress signals, but they don't obey them. They notice the spike, and they stay. That ability separates leaders from reactors. It's not about courage, it's about capacity. Capacity to hold tension without discharge. Most men discharge tension through words, through anger, through movement, through explanation. Strong men hold it, and holding tension is a trainable skill. Here is the discipline. When pressure hits, your first job is not to respond. Your first job is to regulate. Slow your breathing, drop your shoulders, relax your jaw, plant your feet. These are not relaxation techniques, they are commands. Commands to your nervous system that say, I am safe, I am in control. Once the body stabilizes, the mind becomes clear. That's the order. Body first, mind second. Men who skip this step always lose authority under pressure because they are speaking from adrenaline, not intention. You don't need their permission to breathe. You don't need their permission to ground yourself. You don't need their permission to take a moment. That moment is the difference between reaction and command. That's the key. High-ranking men create calm fields. Others feel it. Meetings slow down around them. Arguments lose momentum. Chaos settles. Not because they dominate, but because their nervous system sets the tone. Dysregulated men amplify chaos. They bring tension into rooms. They escalate situations. They make others uneasy. And unease erodes trust. No one follows a man who feels unstable. That's reality. Authority is felt through regulation. You can fake confidence. You cannot fake nervous system control. People sense it instantly. That's why men who try to be dominant fail. Trying is tension. Control is ease. You have a choice. Every day you are either training reactivity or training regulation. Every rushed response trains reactivity. Every pause trains regulation. Every controlled breath builds capacity. Every emotional discharge weakens it. And over time, your rank becomes obvious, not because you declared it, but because your body earned it. This chapter is foundational, because without nervous system control, all discipline collapses under pressure. You cannot hold silence if your body panics. You cannot delay anger if your system spikes. You cannot stop explaining if your chest tightens. Regulation is the base. You've learned what destroys authority. You've learned how speed, validation, anger, and explanation sabotage you. Now you understand the system underneath it all, your nervous system. And once you control it, something changes. You stop needing to react immediately. You realize delay is not weakness. Delay is power. You've trained your body to hold pressure. Now it's time to use that capacity strategically. Because strong men don't deny action. They delay it on purpose. You've mastered regulation. Now let's talk about timing.
Weak men think discipline means saying no. Strong men know discipline means waiting. That's the difference. Most men misunderstand control. They think strength is suppression. They think power is denial.
They think discipline means cutting emotion off at the source. It doesn't. Strong men delay, they do not deny. That's the key. Denial creates pressure. Pressure demands release. Release happens at the wrong time, in the wrong way. Delay does the opposite. Delay creates space. Space creates clarity. Clarity creates authority. You have a choice. Every impulse asks you one question. Will you act now or will you decide later? Weak men act now. Strong men decide later. Not because they are indecisive, but because they are intentional. It's not about avoidance, it's about timing. Denying emotion makes you rigid. Delaying emotion makes you precise. Rigid men break. Precise men win. That's the key. Think about anger. Weak men either explode or suppress it completely. Both fail. Explosion destroys relationships. Suppression stores resentment. Strong men delay anger. They feel it, they acknowledge it, and they wait. They let the nervous system settle. They let the facts surface. They let perspective arrive. Then, and only then, they act. And when they act, it's effective. That's authority. Delay turns emotion into information. Information can be used. Emotion acted on immediately can only cause damage. You don't need their permission to wait. You don't need their permission to think. You don't need their permission to not respond immediately. But the world pressures speed. Text back now. Reply instantly. Decide quickly. React publicly. Speed looks modern. Speed looks confident. But speed under emotion is weakness. That's the key. Strong men are never rushed emotionally. They don't rush decisions. They don't rush conversations. They don't rush reactions. They understand that urgency is often manipulation. If someone needs you to decide right now, they usually benefit from your lack of clarity. Delay protects you. Delay exposes motives. Delay removes traps. That's why strong men delay. You have a choice. The moment you feel pressure to act immediately, pause. That pause is not hesitation. That pause is dominance, because you are reclaiming control of tempo. The man who controls tempo controls outcomes, always. It's not about willpower, it's about discipline. Weak men deny themselves constantly. They say no with force. They resist with tension, and tension always snaps. Strong men delay with ease. They say, not now. They say, I'll decide later. They say, this doesn't require urgency. And urgency dies. Delay starves impulse. Denying impulse feeds it. That's the key. Look at conversations. Weak men respond immediately to defend themselves. Strong men delay response until emotion passes. Weak men explain under pressure. Strong men wait until explanation is unnecessary. Weak men speak to feel relief. Strong men wait until words carry weight. Delay sharpens impact. Immediate response dulls it. You don't need their permission to take space. You don't need their permission to wait a day. You don't need their permission to not engage immediately. Strong men are comfortable letting things sit. Silence does not scare them. Unfinished conversations do not haunt them. Unanswered messages do not control them. Because their identity is not tied to responsiveness. That's the key. Delay also trains respect. When people realize you do not respond instantly, they adjust. They become more careful with their words. They choose better timing. They approach with more intention. Because they know access to you is not automatic. Automatic access creates entitlement. Delayed access creates respect. It's not about being distant. It's about being deliberate.
Strong men delay gratification. They delay reactions. They delay explanations. They delay decisions under pressure. Not forever, just long enough for clarity to arrive. Delay is temporary. Authority is permanent. Weak men deny emotion and hope it disappears. It doesn't. It waits, and it returns stronger. Strong men delay emotion and decide how to use it. That's mastery. Here is the discipline. When you feel the urge to act immediately, label it. Say internally, "This is impulse." Then delay. Not for hours, not for days, just long enough for the nervous system to calm. That might be 30 seconds. It might be 5 minutes. It might be one night. That delay breaks the reflex, and breaking the reflex is the entire point of this book. You have a choice. Delay creates a gap, and the gap is where power lives. In that gap, you see options, you see consequences, you see leverage. Immediate action sees only relief. Relief is cheap. Authority is earned. That's the key. Strong men don't deny life. They delay reaction. They don't suppress desire. They delay expression. They don't avoid conflict. They delay engagement until they can win it. Delay is strategy. Denying is fear. Most men deny because they don't trust themselves. Strong men delay because they do. They trust that clarity will come. They trust that emotion will settle. They trust their ability to decide later. That trust is confidence. You've trained your nervous system. You've learned silence. You've controlled anger. You've stopped explaining. Now delay becomes natural. Because delay requires regulation. An unregulated man cannot wait. A regulated man can. And that ability separates leaders from followers. You've learned to slow down. Now you must learn what happens when you don't rush to prove yourself. Because proving is another reflex, a dangerous one. You've mastered delay. Now let's remove the trap that pulls men back into reaction over and over again. The need to prove.
The ego loves one thing more than comfort. Proof. Proof that you are right. Proof that you are capable. Proof that you matter. And that desire to prove is one of the fastest ways strong men give away power. Proving yourself is the ego's favorite trap. That's the key. You don't prove strength, you demonstrate it over time. You don't prove authority, you earn it through consistency. But ego doesn't want time. It wants validation now. That's why proving feels urgent. You have a choice. Every situation offers two paths. One path says, show them. The other says, let time speak. Weak men choose the first. Strong men choose the second. Not because they don't care, but because they care about outcomes, not applause. It's not about confidence, it's about discipline. The need to prove appears when ego feels threatened. Someone doubts you, someone questions you, someone underestimates you, and instantly the reflex fires. I'll show them. I'll explain. I'll argue. I'll compete. That reflex is expensive because proving puts you in reaction mode, and reaction is the enemy of authority. That's the key. When you try to prove yourself, you accept the other person as the judge. You put yourself on trial. You speak more. You move faster. You expose more. All while believing you are asserting strength. You're not. You're chasing validation. Strong men don't chase, they build. Look at men who argue endlessly. They want to be right more than they want to be effective. They collect wins in conversations and lose in life. Because arguments don't build anything, results do. That's the key. Ego hates silence because silence doesn't prove anything immediately. Silence delays validation, and ego is impatient.
That's why men break silence to explain themselves. That's why they react to disrespect. That's why they rush to demonstrate competence. They want to be seen now. But authority doesn't show up instantly. It accumulates. You have a choice. Every situation offers two paths. One path says, show them. The other says, let time speak. Weak men choose the first. Strong men choose the second. Not because they don't care, but because they care about outcomes, not applause. It's not about confidence, it's about discipline. The need to prove appears when ego feels threatened. Someone doubts you, someone questions you, someone underestimates you, and instantly the reflex fires. I'll show them. I'll explain. I'll argue. I'll compete. That reflex is expensive, because proving puts you in reaction mode, and reaction is the enemy of authority. That's the key. When you try to prove yourself, you accept the other person as the judge. You put yourself on trial. You speak more. You move faster. You expose more. All while believing you are asserting strength. You're not. You're chasing validation. Strong men don't chase, they build. Look at men who argue endlessly. They want to be right more than they want to be effective. They collect wins in conversations and lose in life. Because arguments don't build anything, results do. That's the key. Ego hates silence because silence doesn't prove anything immediately. Silence delays validation, and ego is impatient. That's why men break silence to explain themselves. That's why they react to disrespect. That's why they rush to demonstrate competence. They want to be seen now. But authority doesn't show up instantly. It accumulates. You have a choice. The next time you feel the urge to prove yourself, pause. Ask one question. What happens if I say nothing and keep building? That question dismantles ego, because ego cannot survive delayed gratification. Discipline thrives on it. Proving is short-term relief. Building is long-term authority. Strong men choose long-term. They don't deny pride, they delay its expression. There it is again, delay. Delay is the antidote to ego, because ego wants now. Delay gives you later, and later is where power compounds. You've learned to delay reaction. You've learned to control emotion. You've learned to stay silent. You've learned to stop explaining. Now you must remove the final layer of ego, the urge to prove. Once proving disappears, something shifts. You stop needing validation. You stop reacting to disrespect. You stop rushing to respond. And a new problem appears: time. Because once ego stops demanding attention, you face how you actually use your time. Time reveals discipline, or the lack thereof. You've stopped proving yourself. Now let's talk about the resource that decides everything.
Focus is not about attention. It's about containment. That's the truth most men miss. You don't lose focus because you lack motivation. You lose focus because your emotions keep leaking. Every reaction steals attention. Every emotional spike breaks momentum. Every unnecessary response fragments your mind. Focus requires emotional control. That's the key. Men talk about discipline like it's a productivity issue. It's not. It's an emotional one. If you cannot control how you feel, you cannot control what you build. You have a choice. Every day, you either protect your focus or you sacrifice it to emotion. Anger pulls you sideways. Validation pulls you outward. Anxiety pulls you forward too fast. Ego pulls you into proving. And before you know it, the day is gone. Not because you were lazy, but because you were emotionally undisciplined. It's not about time management. It's about emotional management. Strong men guard their focus the same way they guard their reputation. Aggressively, deliberately, without apology. Because focus is fragile. It doesn't break from hard work, it breaks from emotional noise. That's the key. Every argument costs focus. Every explanation costs focus. Every reaction costs focus. You may not feel it immediately, but momentum dies quietly. And once momentum is gone, motivation follows. Weak men wait for motivation to return. Strong men protect focus so motivation isn't needed. You don't need their permission to disengage. You don't need their permission to go quiet. You don't need their permission to ignore distractions disguised as urgency. Urgency is emotional manipulation. If everything feels urgent, nothing meaningful gets built. That's the key. Focus demands emotional flatness, not numbness, flatness. No spikes, no crashes, no drama. Drama is the enemy of deep work, and drama always starts with emotion. Look at men who never finish anything. They start strong, they talk big, they get distracted easily. Not by lack of ability, but by emotional volatility. One comment ruins their mood. One delay kills momentum. One setback turns into self-doubt. Emotion hijacks focus. Strong men feel the same emotions, they just don't obey them. That's discipline. It's not about passion, it's about consistency. Passion spikes and fades, consistency compounds, and consistency requires emotional control. You cannot stay consistent if your mood decides your actions. Mood-based men are unreliable. Reliable men are emotionally regulated. That's why people trust them. That's why they lead. That's why they win long term. You have a choice. When emotion rises during focus time, do not solve it immediately. Do not analyze it. Do not express it. Do not act on it. Acknowledge it and continue. Tell yourself, I'll deal with this later. That single sentence protects momentum. Emotion wants attention. Delay starves it. There it is again. Delay. Delay is the backbone of focus. Weak men process emotion immediately. Strong men schedule it. Because focus now is more valuable than relief now. That's the key. Focus is not fragile because you are weak. It's fragile because you let too much in. Strong men are selective. They don't give emotional access to everyone. They don't react to every stimulus. They don't engage with every distraction. They choose, and choice is power. You have a choice. Every notification is an invitation. Every comment is bait. Every emotional spike is a test. Pass the test enough times, and focus becomes natural. Fail it repeatedly, and focus disappears. This chapter is not about working harder, it's about working cleaner. Clean work requires emotional control. No drama, no reactivity, no proving, just execution. And execution changes everything. Once you control your emotions, focus deepens. When focus deepens, time slows. When time slows, output multiplies. That's the formula. You've removed reaction, you've slowed speed, you've cut validation, you've mastered silence, you've controlled anger, you've stopped explaining, you've regulated your nervous system, you've learned to delay, you've stopped proving. Now focus locks in. But focus alone is not enough, because even focused men get distracted if they allow too much noise into their environment. Noise is not accidental. It is chosen, and strong men eliminate it ruthlessly. You've learned to control emotion. Now it's time to control your surroundings, because discipline doesn't just live inside you, it lives around you.
Distractions are not accidents. They're choices. That's the truth most men avoid. You don't lose focus. You give it away. One notification at a time, one unnecessary conversation at a time, one emotional impulse at a time. Strong men eliminate distractions ruthlessly. That's the key. Weak men try to manage distractions, Strong men remove them. Managing assumes distraction is unavoidable. Removal assumes authority, and authority always wins. You have a choice. Every distraction asks the same question: will you allow me access to your attention? Most men say yes without thinking. They confuse availability with importance. They confuse busyness with productivity. They confuse stimulation with progress. And years pass with nothing solid built. It's not about willpower. It's about environment. Willpower fails when distractions are constant. Discipline succeeds when distractions are absent. Strong men don't rely on motivation. They design their surroundings. They make focus the default. That's the key. Look at where distractions come from. People who don't share your goals, devices that demand reaction, environments built for comfort, not output. None of these are neutral. They all pull you away from depth. Depth is where results live. Shallow attention produces shallow outcomes. You don't need their permission to disconnect. You don't need their permission to go quiet. You don't need their permission to choose solitude over stimulation. But distractions fight back. They disguise themselves as obligations, as politeness, as just checking. And weak men fall for it. Strong men don't. They understand one thing clearly. Attention is finite. Every distraction takes something you never get back. Time returns. Energy recovers. Attention does not. Once fragmented, it stays fragmented. That's why elimination must be ruthless. Not emotional, not dramatic. Ruthless. Ruthless means no negotiation. If it costs focus, it goes. No explanation, no justification, no apology. That's authority. Most men hesitate here. They worry about offending. They worry about missing out. They worry about appearing unavailable. Those worries are distractions themselves. Strong men accept temporary discomfort for permanent leverage. That's the key. Here is the discipline. Audit your inputs. What enters your mind daily? Conversations that go nowhere, content that excites emotion but builds nothing, noise disguised as information. If it does not serve your mission, it is sabotage, and sabotage does not deserve moderation. It deserves removal. It's not about balance, it's about priority. Balance is for men without a mission. Men with a mission choose imbalance on purpose. They tilt their lives toward creation. Distractions tilt life toward consumption. Consumption never builds authority. Creation does. Strong men consume selectively, they create aggressively. That's the dividing line. Distractions also reveal something uncomfortable. If you constantly seek distraction, you are avoiding depth. Depth requires silence. Depth requires boredom. Depth requires discomfort. Distractions rescue you from all three. Weak men need rescue. Strong men endure. You have a choice. When boredom appears, you can escape it, or you can sit inside it and let focus deepen. Boredom is the doorway to mastery. Distraction slams it shut. That's the key. Look at men who never reach their potential. They are always busy, always connected, always available, and always replaceable, because they never develop depth. Depth makes you irreplaceable. Depth requires isolation. Isolation requires discipline. Distraction destroys both. You don't need their permission to be unreachable. You don't need their permission to protect your mornings. You don't need their permission to shut doors, literally and metaphorically. Strong men guard their best hours fiercely, because those hours build their future. Weak men give those hours away for comfort. Comfort is expensive. It costs growth. That's the key. Ruthless elimination also applies to people. Not everyone deserves access to you. Some people drain focus through drama. Some drain it through doubt. Some drain it through constant need. Access is not kindness, it's investment, and investments must produce returns. If someone consistently pulls you out of alignment, they are a distraction, no matter how familiar they are. Strong men choose alignment over attachment. That choice is never easy, but it is always worth it. It's not about cruelty, it's about clarity. Clear men move forward. Distracted men stay stuck. You have a choice. You can keep negotiating with distractions, or you can eliminate them and move cleanly. Clean movement builds momentum.
Momentum builds confidence. Confidence builds authority. This is not about becoming extreme. It's about becoming effective. Effectiveness requires subtraction. Every great structure is defined by what was removed. Your life is no different. Remove the unnecessary, and the essential becomes obvious. That's the key. You've learned to control reaction. You've slowed emotional speed. You've cut validation addiction. You've mastered silence. You've contained anger. You've stopped explaining. You've regulated your nervous system. You've learned to delay. You've stopped proving. You've locked in focus. Now distractions are the last external threat. Eliminate them, and discipline stabilizes. But even with focus and silence, there is one more test: working when no one is watching. No applause, no validation, no recognition. That's where most men disappear. You've cleared the noise. Now let's see what you do in the quiet.
Most men don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because no one is watching. That's the uncomfortable truth. When there is applause, motivation appears. When there is attention, effort increases. When there is validation, discipline feels easy. But when the room is quiet, most men disappear. Strong men work when no one is clapping. That's the key. Applause is a drug. It feels good. It feels deserved. It feels like progress. But applause does not build outcomes. It builds dependency. And dependency destroys discipline. You have a choice. You can work for recognition, or you can work for results. One feeds ego. The other builds authority. Authority is not loud. It is accumulated, quietly, day after day. It's not about motivation. It's about commitment. Motivation is emotional. Commitment is structural. Motivation shows up when conditions are perfect. Commitment shows up regardless. Strong men don't wait to feel inspired. They act because action is who they are. Weak men wait for energy. Strong men generate it through movement. That's the key. Working without applause exposes something critical: your relationship with yourself. When no one is watching, there is no performance, no identity to maintain, no image to protect, only standards. And most men have never defined theirs. They borrow standards from others, from praise, from approval, from attention. Remove the audience and they collapse. Strong men don't collapse. They tighten discipline. Because they are not fueled by praise. They are fueled by direction. You don't need their permission to work quietly. You don't need their permission to be unseen. You don't need their permission to build in silence. Silence is not absence. Silence is incubation. That's the key. Everything powerful is built quietly first. Muscle grows in rest. Skill grows in repetition. Reputation grows in private consistency. By the time others notice, the work is already done. Weak men want recognition before results. Strong men accept results before recognition. That order matters. It's not about external reward. It's about internal alignment. When you work only when praised, you outsource discipline. When you work regardless of recognition, you internalize it. Internal discipline cannot be taken away. External motivation always disappears. That's why men who rely on applause burn out. They need constant feedback, constant reassurance, constant acknowledgement. And life does not provide that. Life provides silence. Strong men are comfortable there. Here is the discipline. Do the work that no one will see. Train when no one posts it. Study when no one asks. Prepare when no one expects it. That work compounds. And compounding doesn't announce itself. It just shows up later as dominance. You have a choice. When boredom appears, you can quit, or you can lean in. Boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is the test. It asks one question. Do you need stimulation to continue? Weak men answer yes. Strong men answer no. That's the key. Most men quit in the quiet phase. They start strong. They post early. They talk big. Then the likes slow. The comments stop. The recognition fades. And so do they. Not because the plan was wrong, but because they needed applause to continue. Strong men expect silence. They plan for it. They know the quiet phase is where separation happens. That's where amateurs exit and professionals stay. You don't need their permission to stay. You don't need their encouragement to continue. You don't need validation to maintain standards. Standards are self-enforced. That's authority. It's not about discipline in public. It's about discipline in private. Private discipline creates public results. Public discipline without private structure collapses. That's why image-driven men fade. They perform well when watched and disappear when unseen. Strong men reverse that. They work hardest when no one is watching, because that's where real advantage is built. No competition, no comparison, no noise, just progress. You have a choice. You can chase applause, or you can chase mastery. Applause fades. Mastery compounds. And mastery makes applause irrelevant. That's the key. Working in silence also strengthens self-trust. You stop needing reassurance. You stop checking for feedback. You stop adjusting your path based on reactions. You build internal certainty. Certainty is felt. People sense it later, even if they never saw the work. That's how authority shows up, unannounced. This chapter is where discipline becomes real, because everything before this prepares you for this moment. Reaction removed, emotion controlled, silence mastered, focus locked, distractions eliminated. Now there is nothing left but you and the work. No excuses, no audience, no shortcuts. And that's where strong men are made. You've learned to work without a clapping. Now comes the next evolution. Understanding how time itself becomes a weapon when discipline is consistent. You've built the habits. Now let's talk about leverage.
Every mistake that cost you respect, every argument you wish you handled differently, every moment where emotion outran intelligence, it wasn't fate, it was a reflex. From this moment forward, you do not react, you decide. You do not explain, you execute. You do not rush, you command. The world does not reward the loud, the fast, or the emotional. It rewards the man who can sit inside pressure and remain unmoved. Your challenge is simple. The next time you feel triggered, pause. The next time you want to explain, stay silent. The next time emotion rises, breathe and delay. Train the gap, kill the reflex, and become the man nothing can control.